Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We're accelerating the numbers of cases in our community.
Disturbing data. COVID cases in BC doubling every 13 days. Also,
well, people need to be taking masks much more seriously.
With new cases surging, could tighter restrictions be coming? And
we are creating new and expedited immigration pathways for those living in Hong Kong.
With China cracking down on the pro-democracy movement, Canada widens the welcome mat.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. New and concerning numbers tonight from BC's top doctor, revealing where and why COVID-19 cases are surging in our province. And Dr. Bonnie Henry's prognosis is somewhat bleak if we can't contain the spread. It comes as she reports record COVID numbers right across the board tonight. Let's bring in our Zara Premji to break down some of the key messages from today's modeling update. So Zara, there were a lot of numbers, a lot of scenarios being put out there by Dr. Henry, but overall, what is she having to say?
Well, Mike, the new modeling that came out today that you mentioned, 44 slides broke down just where the cases are happening, how they're happening, and who is testing positive. First, it's no secret Dr. Henry brought in new restrictions this past weekend because the numbers are not looking good for our province. She says, simply put, the last few days, if you look at the population of Ontario, our numbers are exceeding their positivity rate. Then she says it again on repeat. We've heard it many times. We need to scale back. She went so far as to say she's getting questions like, is it okay to have 12 people in a boardroom for a meeting? And she says, again, simply put, if there's enough space, maybe, but why? She isn't mandating everyone shut down, but she's putting a call out, asking common sense to prevail when the curve is no longer flattened. She showed a graph that indicated our cases per day have doubled in the past few weeks every 13 days, pushing contact tracers to their absolute limits.
For right now, the 2-week period, stepping back our social interactions, particularly in the Lower Mainland, not having that visit from grandparents or family in our house right now, postponing that visit. And yes, I do think if we get things down to a reasonable level, we can start introducing those social interactions in a more measured and safe way again.
And so there are always a lot of questions for Dr. Henry on schools. Why are they remaining open? What is she saying about that tonight?
Well, she says evidence shows schools are not where transmission is happening, only exposure. She says while the number of exposures may seem high in the schools, the transmission is happening in group settings outside of school, family gatherings, friends getting together, parents even watching their kids play soccer together, but not in the actual school, which is why last weekend restrictions came into place, and we'll just have to see what the numbers look like after this 14-day restriction period. Because with Christmas and other holidays around the corner, Henry couldn't definitively say what's next because she really doesn't know. But for anyone worried about Santa, she did have one heads up.
I think Santa probably has immunity, and we'll look at how we can facilitate him. I think he'll be washing his hands a lot, and he probably won't be eating cookies and milk in every house this year, but we'll find ways of making it work.
So while Santa may be going about things differently, as she says, how we will get to spend Christmas and the rest of the holiday period is still uncertain right now. What we do know is that will be decided in the future. Mike.
All right, Zara, thanks very much for that. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the newscast, the latest COVID-19 numbers paint a rather grim picture of the pandemic in our province. New records being set in nearly every category today since the government's last update 2 days ago. They include 4 new deaths, bringing BC's total to 288. Hospitalizations are now at an all-time high, with 155 people in care, eclipsing the previous record set back in April. There are now 44 patients in critical care. Active cases up to nearly 5,800, also the highest ever in BC. More than 11,000 people are now under active public health monitoring, an increase of more than 1,000 since just Tuesday. Since that update, there have been over 1,100 confirmed cases, including a single-day record of 594 in the past 24 hours. 72% of those are in Fraser Health Region. And the new data released by the BC Centre for Disease Control shows which cities in the Lower Mainland were hardest hit by COVID-19 last month. Surrey had the most cases in October, having more than 2,100 people test positive for the virus. Vancouver had the second highest number with just over 1,000 cases. 7 out of the 10 regions listed are in the Fraser Health Authority, which constitutes the bulk of the new case count. As mentioned earlier, there are now more than 5,700 active cases of COVID-19 in BC. Well, gyms and fitness clubs have been hit hardest by the most recent public health orders, with many owners scrambling to try to reopen over the past week. Some businesses have already been given the stamp of approval, but as John Hernandez reports tonight, others say they're being kept in the dark.
Boxing gym owner Dave Brett says the latest COVID-19 restrictions hit him like a sharp right hook, so he threw a counterpunch.
We were saying to the members that it was like that sneaky right cross that you can't quite see behind the jab.
Like all gyms in the region, Griffin's Boxing was ordered to suspend training until it updated its safety plans. Brett filed the paperwork right away and didn't let off the phone.
I couldn't tell you if it was because I called 1,000 times or if I emailed 100 times of why we got an approval so fast. I'm not going to question it. I am going to just say thank you.
Brett knows he's one of the lucky ones. Confusion has shrouded the most recent public health order, especially when it comes to gyms. Owners are asked to submit their plans to health authorities for approval. While a handful of clubs on the North Shore say they've been given the green light, other centers are getting a different message.
We're in limbo. We're hearing reports of other studios claiming to have been approved to open, yet we're also hearing from Vancouver Coastal Health that they have not issued any approvals.
Boyd Thompson co-owns this yoga studio in Vancouver. He says he's been in constant contact with Vancouver Coastal Health, but to little effect. The mounting stress, enough to warrant a deep stretch.
It's confusing and it's perplexing. We want to comply. We want to go beyond compliance.
Vancouver Coastal Health could not confirm whether it's issued any approvals, instead saying it's still working out the details with the province.
Some people have had really good safety plans, but what we've seen is we're learning more about the virus, and it's not about people not doing the right thing. It's about the fact that we need to relook at these and readjust with what we're learning about those viruses.
Those with the lights on, hoping their neighbors will get the same treatment.
I have a lot of friends in this industry, and a lot of friends have not been given the approval. And I want them to be open.
More gyms are expected to open their doors in the coming days. But there's no guarantees the reopenings will last for long. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Whether you have concerns about your kids and COVID-19 or want to know more about BC's current projections about the virus, we've got you covered tonight with a live question and answer session that's coming up shortly. At the bottom of the hour, in fact, we're going to be joined once again by Dr. Gustafson. She is our province's Deputy Provincial Health Officer, and she's here to answer any questions on the pandemic you might send us right now. Some of you have been doing that throughout the day, but you can still get your questions in by emailing us or calling the number on your screen. If you're watching us online, you can add them to the comments section on Facebook or YouTube. Vancouver Mayor Kennedy Stewart delivered his annual State of the City address today. Stewart is at the halfway point of his term at the helm of our city. His address highlighted the challenges Vancouver has faced during the COVID-19 pandemic, including the growing opioid deaths and increasing number of unhoused people. Since the pandemic began, unemployment rose from 4% to 11%, and over 8,500 businesses have closed.
The feds have saved our city and many other cities by putting in programs like SERVE and Help the Businesses. Really, cities can only do so much. The federal government has really, seen us well through COVID, and we just had discussions 2 days ago that this help is going to continue, which is all very good news for us as we weather this tremendous challenge.
And when addressing the economic recovery of the city, Mayor Stewart stressed the need to focus on a plan that helps the people hit the hardest. In an effort to claw back the public health care costs incurred by the opioid crisis, Canada's provinces have filed a $67.4 billion U.S. claim against OxyContin producer Purdue Pharma. British Columbia's claim alone is for more than $9.1 billion. It is one of the more than 600,000 claimants listed in documents filed against the drug company. It was introduced about 2 decades ago, marking what addiction experts recognize as the beginning of the opioid crisis. In 2018, the BC government launched its own lawsuit. That claim alleges they knew or should have known that opioids were addictive and leaking into the illegal market. The federal government is now researching sustainable technology solutions to transition away from open net fish farming on BC's coast. An interim report expected to be handed to the fisheries minister in the spring, phasing out net pen fish farming in BC waters by 2025 was a Liberal campaign promise in the federal election. Some studies say the open net farm spread parasites and viruses to wild salmon.
This has been a controversial issue where some people, the only solution is to have all the pens out of the water yesterday. And for others, they would hope to see the industry as it is expanded. I think a responsible path is going to have us navigating multiple stakeholders.
The government will be working with First Nations, the aquaculture industry, and environment stakeholders on the report. There are about 130 marine sites in BC waters, according to the Fisheries Department website. Well, dozens of people, including local politicians, gathered outside the BC Ministry of Forests office in Prince George today. They oppose the government's plan to allow forestry company Canfor to keep spraying local trees with the herbicide glyphosate. The renewal of the pest management plan will allow the company to spray and eradicate tree species like birch, cottonwood, and aspen on their new cut blocks, making room for other species like spruce and pine. The group Stop the Spray BC says the herbicide destroys the area's high biodiversity and wildlife habitats. It's demanding the government ban the spraying.
Urban areas of the south don't quite understand what's going on up here. It's like we're turning our forests into plantations of 1 or 2 species, which is the exact opposite thing that forest science is saying we need to do right now. So it's insane. It's insanity. It's mismanagement is what it is.
Prince George Mackenzie MLA-elect Mike Morris says he plans to bring forward a private member's bill to ban the use of the herbicide. The Ministry of Forests says glyphosate is safe and that its use has decreased in recent years. The federal government is making it easier for students and asylum seekers from Hong Kong to study and stay in Canada. The announcement coming a day after Beijing clamped down on pro-democracy politicians. David Thornton looks at Ottawa's latest move to push back on China.
After pro-democracy politicians unfurled a protest banner at Hong Kong's legislature, Canada is rolling out the Welcome Mat.
I'm pleased to announce that we are creating new and expedited immigration pathways for those living in Hong Kong.
Minister Marco Mendicino says Canada will target Hong Kong's young people, including students, recent graduates, and their families. The immigration minister says it will also be easier for Hong Kongers to seek asylum here, and there will be new paths for permanent residency and protections for those who've broken Beijing's law.
No one will be prohibited from claiming asylum or applying to any other immigration program in Canada solely by virtue of having been charged under China's national security law.
Today's move was welcomed by activists in Canada who oppose Beijing's clampdown in Hong Kong, but they want to see more action.
It still seems very tempered on the Canadian government's part, and it still is trying to dissuade any angry reaction out of Beijing. So it is a little disappointing. However, again, good news is always good news.
But even with that good news and the best of intentions, Canada's top diplomat in the region recently told a parliamentary committee that the new law could prevent those under investigation from even leaving Hong Kong. David Thornton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Alberta's premier makes a COVID announcement at home because Jason Kenney has been exposed to coronavirus and is now in isolation. How his quarantine comes as the province struggles with a surge in cases. Next. And thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. Well, many schools have been looking at creative ways to build students' learning skills this year, and one New Brunswick elementary school is taking that literally. Its students and staff are building 3 outdoor classrooms. CBC News took a look at the unique project.
It's a shame that, a global pandemic gives you new opportunities, but life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, I guess, so. With COVID going on now, we need some more learning spaces for the kids. School's growing, so we decided to build 3 outdoor classrooms. Our middle school kids are turning recycled pallets into sofas, so that'll be part of the seating.
Well, I'm a pretty athletic kid, so I hate staying inside, just sitting down all day. And that's really all we do today, now, during COVID.
A bunch of live edge lumber that we're going to turn into tabletops, and the kids are also pouring some concrete tabletops. And then we'll have a pergola and a roof over top of one of our outdoor classrooms, and then a tarped roof over the other one. It'll be a little chilly for some months.
I think if we all just dress appropriately, we'll be okay. I personally like it when it's cold outside too, so yeah.
I think it'll be cold, but I think we're Canadians, we're used to it. And I think we should maybe have at the office some mittens and hats to make sure everyone's not getting frostbite and things like that. But yeah, I think it'll still be okay as long as it's not minus 30. And
they're already nagging me about when this will be ready. When can we get started? Can we use it when it's raining? Can we use it when it's snowing? Who's going to shovel off the outdoor classroom so that we can use it? And I said, well, I've got the shovels. You guys have the manpower, so they can shovel out their own classroom, and the kids are quite excited about it, so I think it will work out really well. A lot of these kids haven't had a chance to do things like this before. They've never held some of these tools. They've never built anything.
I like hands-on activities, and yeah, I just think it's really interesting, just being able to help out.
I think it's a great idea because, especially for mental health, we're stuck in our chairs all day. Well, not stuck, but we're sitting in there all day, and it's really helpful to open your mind up to new possibilities and things like that, and be more creative.
Well, I think this is going to be a good opportunity to get up, move around, and enjoy the outside.
It'll be chilly back there before too long, although they have had a recent hot streak. Okay, back in a few moments, a lot more COVID-19 news from across the country and around the world. Stay with us. New COVID-19 projections show daily cases in Ontario could hit up to 6,500 by mid-December. Experts say hospitalizations, long-term care cases, and deaths will continue to rise there. As Lorenda Redekop explains, the grim projections come on the same day Ontario once again broke a record with more than 1,500 new cases.
It is alarming, and we want your attention on this matter.
In the worst case scenario of the 2 models presented, cases could hit around 6,500 a day by mid-December. Cases per 100,000 people are climbing. So is the percentage of people testing positive. Experts say whichever model they use, within 2 weeks, 150 people will be in intensive care. It's a critical point when they have to cancel other surgeries. Asked what will happen without adding further restrictions.
You'll continue to see the growth, so it won't be a flat line. You'll continue to see growth in cases. You'll see the higher levels of ICU use probably hit. You'll see the mortality continue to climb in long-term care homes, and even with new restrictions, if they're implemented today, you'd still see growth for a little while in the cases and the mortality as it takes that time to filter through the system. But there is, I do not believe that there's a way that the cases will change without action.
The experts say Ontario could get worse than certain countries in Europe, which are currently under lockdown. The NDP is calling for a 2-week partial shutdown in the hardest hit areas of the province.
I'm calling on the province to pay businesses to undergo a 2-week modified stage 1 circuit breaker in hotspots only in our province, to break the chains of transmission and drop the case counts in Ontario.
Already over the past 2 weeks, the increasing numbers have been hard for some people to hear. People planning for a much different Christmas season.
It's very disturbing, it's very upsetting, it's very isolating. We're trying to take advantage of every last beautiful moment before the snow and horribleness, but it's not the same. Getting virtual hugs is not the same as getting real hugs.
My family and I are actually not buying gifts this year because we don't want to go shopping. We're going to make gifts. We're going to find other ways to express, different ways to celebrate Christmas.
And for hospital workers, they're expecting the increases to continue.
The feeling is that we're only at the beginning of this now. I mean, if you look at the curves, we're on a steep spike up. And even if drastic measures are put into place, it's going to be a while before we see that. So we're really bracing ourselves for things to get much worse.
She expects there likely will be an increase in cases following Christmas, so January, possibly even into February. She says the same thing has happened after every holiday during this pandemic. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
And Quebec is considering shutting down schools for an extended period of time around the Christmas holidays. As the CBC's Lauren McCallum explains, it comes after students in hundreds of classes were sent home in the last 48 hours.
Teachers and students have been forced to wear masks and take extra precautions since Quebec reopened schools this fall, but now they could be shut down again.
For me, it's still the last solution, but right now we've seen a very important increase also in classrooms that we had to close. So we're looking at this possibility, but there's no decision taken.
Legault says he still hasn't made a final decision. He's consulting with public health, but he has suggested the Christmas holiday break could be extended for a month or more. The Premier says he's negotiating with teacher unions to see if the time can be made up in June and July.
Teachers would not be happy to lose those 2 months in the summer that they count on quite a bit. And not only that, our schools in Quebec are not air conditioned, so it would be really difficult to be working in the summer in schools that are poorly ventilated.
The idea of closing down schools worries Mary Kennedy, a single mother of 4.
I've been off work, so it's been hard, and then recently I'm trying to look for a new job, and with the way school's going, it's hard. Like, where do I start? Where do I begin? Can I do it, So if it closes, it's going to be hard.
But other parents think it's the right thing to do to control the spread of COVID-19.
It would just revert back to homeschooling, which is what has to be done right now. As a parent, I don't think they should be in school right now. I really don't. I think that we need a little bit of time for separation. We'll get things under control, get things moving forward, and once we see that there's progress to that, then we'll set back and put them in school and keep them in their bubbles.
Legault says he hopes to give parents enough notice to prepare, but closing schools might be the only way to prevent a bad situation from becoming even worse. Lauren McCallum, CBC News, Montreal.
Okay, now let's turn to hard-hit Alberta with Canada's second highest infection rate per capita after Manitoba. It announced a whole new raft of measures to try to slow COVID-19 today, but the plan falls well short of what many doctors have been calling for. Carolyn Dunn has details and the reaction.
A final deep cleanse at this spin studio before a 2-week shutdown starts tomorrow.
We hope that the government isn't just throwing a dart and looking to see what happens and what works.
With cases surging and Alberta's hospitals starting to feel the strain, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney announced new mandatory measures from self-isolation while awaiting his own test results.
But COVID is starting to win, and we cannot let that happen. This 2-week push is our last chance to avoid more restrictive measures that I and most Albertans desperately want to avoid.
So in many areas, indoor sports are canceled, worship services need to scale down to 1/3 capacity, bars and restaurants that serve liquor will have to cut off service by 10 p.m., and employers are asked to reduce the number of people at work however they can. Everyone is voluntarily asked to drastically reduce social gatherings again.
If you can start meeting friends or family members via Skype or Zoom, please start today.
Today, hundreds of Alberta health experts wrote another letter expressing concern the restrictions are not enough.
It's just too late for weak measures. It's just too late. The fear is that our health system is in grave danger. We're imminently going to collapse.
Some businesses like this Edmonton deli are choosing to exceed the government restrictions by moving to takeout and counter service only.
We also all have families and people we care about and our own health.
It's likely to be weeks before it's clear if today's restrictions are enough to turn the surging COVID tide in Alberta. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Calgary.
All right, time for our first check of the forecast. Johanna Wagstaffe inside tonight, which is probably a good place to be, all things considered.
I was just out on the roof testing things out, and it is downpouring. I've managed to recover, and anybody out in it tonight, it's a soaker that will linger in through tomorrow morning. A lot going on with the weather, including new wind warnings for Victoria and snow for our mountain passes. But let me start off with the current temperatures, because this is sort of telling the story across the board. We had rain move in for the mid-morning hours. That was system 1 of 2, and now we're getting a second punch. 4 at YVR right now, 3 out towards Abbotsford, but notice a 0 up towards Squamish. That's where we're seeing heavy snow, and east of Hope starting to accumulate on the Coquihalla as well. Current radar shows things looking pretty wet, just filling in right now in downtown Vancouver. We are getting fresh snow for the local mountains, the snow level down around 800 meters. And this is the system. I was watching it for the past couple of days, wondering if that center of low would form and move inland close to Vancouver, but it looks like it's now hitting closer to Victoria. So Environment Canada just about an hour ago issuing a wind warning for the greater Victoria area. That's for winds really ramping up through tomorrow morning, peaking tomorrow afternoon as the sort of center of this low passes just to the south of Victoria. We're looking at gusts over 70 kilometers per hour. It's a gusty day for us, though, in Vancouver. I will take you through to the weekend and some sunshine coming up.
Oh, yay. All right. We'll look forward to that. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
And coming up next, we're going to be joined live by Dr. Gustafson. She is our province's Deputy Provincial Health Officer, answering any questions on the pandemic you might have. Send them to us now if you haven't already. Get your questions in by emailing us or calling the number on your screen. If you're watching online, you can add them to the comments section on Facebook or YouTube.
Well, battered by days of heavy snow and now high winds and rain, Vancouver's weather woes continued today as temperatures rise. The city is bracing for a big melt. Deborah Goebel reports.
With the bone-chilling cold front gone and steadily rising temperatures, Vancouver has turned into a slushy mess.
No, we're just checking, see a problem, take care of it.
Could be worse, though. Yeah? How? Could be still snowing. Yeah. Minus 40.
Drivers, thinking they were over the worst of it, had to deal with new hazards on the road.
Because with a big thaw comes big puddles. And while Vancouverites may know all about puddles, even for us, these are a bit big.
Oh, I got my distributor cap wet, so I'm not going anywhere. I'm trying to dry it off right now.
All over the Lower Mainland, cars were stalling.
And the Via Rail train wasn't going anywhere either. A switch likely malfunctioned due to the bad weather. In Greater Vancouver, awnings weighed down by heavy wet snow began caving in. This small apartment building had to be evacuated Friday night.
We realized that the building was, the ceiling was coming down, and I went up into the attic and saw the attic bowing in. I told everybody to get out of the building and, because we'd be sitting in God's lap pretty quick if we don't.
It has been a very unusual month for the Lower Mainland.
We had about 5 or 6 storms just in a row with nothing leaving before the next one came, so the snow just piling up.
The good news is, with temperatures expected to hover around 6 degrees for the next week, the snow will be gone soon. But with that comes another danger, an increased risk of avalanche throughout the province. Deborah Goebel, CBC News, Vancouver.
Are you all set for Christmas? Good. Those look like good muffins, are they? Oh, I had my breakfast, but thank you very much.
Each year at this time, Canada Post sponsors its Santa Letter Lunch. Kids who bring letters correctly addressed to Santa, including his postal code of ho ho ho, get into the aquarium free of charge.
Do you know I get about 20, 30, 40,000 letters every year, I do.
Santa then picks one letter from the pack, and its author gets to feed the aquarium's 2 beluga whales.
My name is Roy Toll.
Roy Toll. Is Roy Toll here?
Feeding the whales was a little trickier than he thought.
Put one in his mouth? Give it a good try.
Okay, in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be joined by BC's Deputy Provincial Health Officer for a live Q&A, speaking once again with Dr. Gustafson to answer any questions you may have on COVID-19. You can send us those now by calling the number on your screen or send us an email. A lot of you have done that already. If you're watching online, just message us in the comments section on Facebook or YouTube. But first, let's get you up to speed on the pandemic situation in our province. As Briar Stewart shows us, today's provincial modeling update shows alarming spread and a system struggling to cope.
Over the past 2 days, more than 1,100 people in BC have tested positive for COVID-19 and 4 people have died. With cases currently doubling every 13 days, officials say it's putting a strain on the public health system.
And what we're seeing today and yesterday, numbers that make me slightly anxious, those reflect exposures that happened a week ago.
The surge in cases is centered around the Lower Mainland. Officials say it's been fueled by social gatherings and has spilled over into long-term care homes. There are more than 40 outbreaks at healthcare facilities.
This is a time to take no chances, to give COVID-19 no room to grow.
Over the weekend, BC rolled out restrictions, closing some gyms and banning social gatherings, even at restaurants and bars.
I don't want it to be for naught. So I think we do need the follow-up. People need to be taking masks much more seriously.
Eli Gershkovich runs Steamworks, which operates a brewery, brew pub, and liquor store. While masks are mandatory at his businesses, he says a few customers who don't want to wear them have threatened his staff.
You need to research the law. I'm a lawyer, so you don't know it.
That's why he wishes the BC government would make masks mandatory everywhere and require proof from those who say they have a medical exemption.
As utopian as it may be, well, we should trust people if they say they have a medical exemption. It needs to be enforced, and we need to use all reasonable measures.
Officials say it won't move to make masks mandatory because they believe most people are wearing them already. They hope that if everyone follows the restrictions over the next 2 weeks, the province can avoid any more closures. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
All right, so what is next for BC and what can people do to try to slow the spread. Joining us once again live to answer your COVID-19 questions, BC's Deputy Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Gustafson. Thanks for doing this again, Doctor. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay, we got lots of questions coming in. We just heard plenty of discussion about masks once again. I know Dr. Henry gets asked that all the time, as do you. Here's our first question tonight from Gwen asking, what would be the trigger to make it mandatory that everyone wears a mask at public indoor places?
That is a question that comes up quite a lot. And I think it's important to remember that the word mandatory is just a word. What's important is that people wear masks most of the time when they are within 2 meters of people they don't know in indoor crowded places. And we're actually seeing that happening quite a bit. And so at this point, adding the word mandatory is really not the intervention that we are looking for. I think in British Columbia, people are wearing masks where necessary, and we don't want to be in a position where we're essentially telling people who may not be able to wear a mask or who have forgotten a mask that you're going to be denied essential services. And that's really what the word mandatory means. It is recommended. It's recommended when people are in any crowded space or they are at where they cannot keep a 2-meter distance from others.
All right, here's one from Reese on Twitter wanting to know, why is contact tracing so slow these days? Too many times we hear people are getting letters 5 to 10 days after possible exposure. Is there any explanation for why, as Reese says, it's so slow?
Well, as you see, when there are surges in cases, then there comes a point where the number of cases can exceed the capacity of public health to maintain that very rapid contact tracing. And that is one of our triggers to start implementing some further restrictions, which is what Dr. Henry has done. The other things we do at that time is implement some digital tools that can help us. So, for example, last Friday, we have started a texting message whereby positive results are texted to people who have signed up for that texting app or that texting service. So if you are a person who's getting tested for COVID-19, we strongly encourage you to sign up for that text message or for other electronic ways of receiving your results, because the most important thing to do is, if you're COVID-19 positive, is to isolate at home, and for your household members to isolate at home. So although there may be some delay in being able to call people, as long as the single most important intervention is in place, then we can focus investigating those clusters that are important to us. But basically, it's a question of volume.
Okay. Here's one from Rita, called in just a few minutes ago to ask, and this relates to what we've been talking about a lot lately, the no more safe six and what have you. Can business people meet in a restaurant for lunch?
So at the moment, what we really are asking you to do is to keep the gathering with people with whom you don't normally interact to an absolute minimum. So if it's your office mates with whom you are together most of the time and you choose to go for lunch, that's less risky than people who don't normally interact. So we really are trying to minimize non-essential social interactions. And if you can avoid it in the next 2 weeks, please do. That's really the overall message of everything that we've been saying. In order for us to be able to protect our healthcare system, protect our essential functions such as work, school, we really want to minimize those non-essential interactions with groups. That is the intent of the order. So this is not the week I would go for lunch with your office mates. You can do it again, not this week, not next week.
Okay, very good. Cheryl has called in to ask, why do we not have mandatory temperature checks at schools, workplaces, and stores? Why not more cleaning in public spaces, that kind of thing?
So the mandatory temperature checks actually don't add a great deal to our ability to detect COVID-19. One of the things we know is it has a wide range of symptoms, and what we really want to do is a daily symptom check. Obviously, if you have fever, if you have a cough, those are important symptoms for you to, so fever, chills, cough, loss of sense of smell, and shortness of breath, you should not be going to work or school. You should seek testing. And the addition of a temperature check just empirically doesn't add that much. It's a very visible thing to do. One of the things that has been seen is that sometimes people will do a temperature check and think that it's okay, where I don't have a temperature, I'm good to go, even though they have other symptoms. So the temperature check by itself is not enough, and it seems to not add a great deal. With respect to frequent cleaning, we do recommend frequent cleaning. We are finding that likely surfaces may not play as big a role in transmission as in some other diseases. So I think at this point, the safety measures that we have in place, in particular with respect to cleaning, are sufficient. It's probably the other measures, such as staying at home when you're sick, getting tested if you're sick, self-isolating if you have COVID-19, are more important.
Speaking tonight with BC's Deputy Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Reka Gustafson. Lots of questions coming in, Doctor. This one timely. We saw some snow on the local mountains over the last couple of days and up in Whistler. Tony has emailed to ask, how are the new restrictions going to possibly affect the upcoming opening of ski resorts around the province? I think one of the local hills is planning to open, I believe, tomorrow.
So at the moment, there are no specific orders related to ski hills. If there are safety plans in place, outdoor sports are certainly some of the things that are safe to do and are healthy to do. There need to be safety plans in place. It's really important. They actually work. At the moment, there are no specific orders related to ski hills, and certainly we want to monitor the transmission of COVID-19 very carefully because the better control we have, the more of these activities can remain open.
Okay, Sue has emailed to ask you, are the Vancouver, Coastal and Fraser Health regions considered to be two distinct regions or one collective region when the travel restrictions are applied? Sue says, I live in Burnaby. Can I go to Vancouver for non-essential reasons like retail shopping, picking up an item, that kind of thing?
Again, right now, these are the travel restrictions are recommendations. We are actually asking people to limit non-essential travel from between the regions and certainly in and out of the region. So at the moment, again, it's not a forbidden, but we would ask you not to do it this time. We are asking to limit non-essential movement between regions as well as in and out of the region.
Okay, there were a lot of questions today. There are always a lot of questions about schools and school-age children. Samantha has emailed in to ask, if school-age children aren't getting tested as much, how can we be sure there's no transmission among them, especially if they're asymptomatic?
So that's a really good question. And one of the things, we're certainly monitoring schools very, very carefully. We've actually had quite a significant increase in testing among children, of course, because school has started. I think there's concern about symptoms. It's also respiratory infection season has started. So we know that we are getting actually quite a lot of testing among children. And we are not seeing the transmission that we are seeing in adult populations. And we would be concerned about seeing transmission in the homes of children, though children are much less likely to transmit to adults than the other way around. And so is there a possibility of undetected transmission? Yes, there is a possibility of undetected transmission. But if it's not leading to illness or it's not leading to further transmission, then that's not necessarily a concern. So what we want to make sure, it's important to remember, what is it that we're trying to achieve with pandemic control? Is to prevent severe illness, to prevent hospitalizations and deaths, and at the same time minimize societal disruption. So at the moment, what we know is that there isn't transmission in schools. In fact, the accumulating evidence from throughout the world is that schools are not a significant place of transmission. And we're actually seeing similar things play out in other places with safety plans. It's very interesting about COVID-19. It doesn't take very much to tip this infection over from a transmissible infection to a much less transmissible infection. In fact, very basic infection control measures, very basic safety plans that are in place at school are proving to be an effective way to prevent transmission in school settings worldwide. So in terms of, is there is it possible that we're missing some transmission in schools? Yes, it is possible. It's even likely, but we know that it's not having an impact on COVID-19 in the population. It's not having impact COVID-19 on either the adults or the children that are associated with schools.
Okay, and just very quickly, time for one more. Lee has emailed in to ask, a lot of disbelievers claim there are plenty of hospital beds and officials are overreacting right now. Can you try to answer that one?
Well, we're certainly monitoring hospital beds, and at the moment, and we've created capacity, but we're also seeing quite significant increase in transmission and quite a significant increase in hospitalization over the last few weeks. So for the caller, we don't want to get to a place where there aren't enough hospital beds. That would mean that we would not only be unable to provide the adequate care for COVID-19, we would also be limited in our ability to provide adequate care for all the other things for which people go to hospital. So, so in terms of, are there plenty of hospital beds? We are concerned with the current growth that we could reach a place where we don't have sufficient hospital capacity to meet the need, but you certainly don't want to test that. And we also know that hospitalizations come several days or even a week or more after increasing cases. So we do have to act early.
Dr. Reka Gustafson, thank you so much once again for joining us tonight and answering those questions.
My pleasure. See you again.
6:45, there's a live look. BC Place, downtown Vancouver tonight. The rain arrived today, as Johanna said it would, and there's plenty more on the way. Her forecast is next.
My favorite thing is just the driving and meeting the people. Anything goes. Whatever they want to talk, we can talk.
We're like bartenders on the road. People seem to want to talk to us, tell us everything going on. It was a piece of a person or a glimpse of a person's life that you wouldn't normally get. You can't do that in the backseat.
Before the COVID, the passengers will sit in front and enjoy the conversation. Now everybody has to sit in the back because of the barrier in the cars and the mask that people wear and we wear. You know, you can have the same conversation and, you know, you feel definitely disconnected with the barrier, but it's for our own good, for our own protection.
The barrier is there for protection, and everybody recognizes that and quite happy, but the same as wearing a mask, it muffles the sound. A lot of the time you're asking your passenger to repeat what they say or repeat it back to them to make sure you understand. I mean, interaction's gone down a lot since all this started. It's a lot less chit-chat. I mean, the barrier muffles the sounds. It really, to a degree, cuts you off from direct interaction. Personal touch is not there anymore.
First week after the big cluster in the funeral home, a lot of the drivers stopped driving because you never know, and a lot of drivers stopped for a month or two, and then a lot of us went back on the road.
It was lonely. I mean, work dropped. It cratered. It went down 80% of our calls coming in. There was nobody on the road. We would drive across the parkway. I might see 3 cars at 9 o'clock in the morning. Everybody got scared. Everybody hid. I think it'll come back eventually. If we do keep the barriers up and people are resigned to sit in the back seat only, it won't be as much. I'd like to see people back in the front seat again, so you got that understanding, the connectivity from passenger to driver.
It's always in my mind, and I even have, you know, extra mask if somebody comes and say, well, I don't have any, or I lost mine, I can offer them a mask for a ride. And they appreciate that, and they call us again. And you know, like a lot of people now are hoping to, maybe to the end of this year, we will have a vaccine and maybe we will go back to so-called old life, because now we are dealing with so-called new life.
The Market Report is brought to you by Fortis BC. We've got even bigger rebates.
Rebate.
Whoa! On select high-efficiency equipment for business, but only for a limited time.
Johanna Wagstaffe is back now with the forecast. You told us last night at this time that the rain would be arriving today. It certainly did, and doesn't seem to be going anywhere too quickly.
No, but thank you for, I appreciate you always, letting everyone know when I get it right.
Well,
and I
you're
know you
always
read my
right.
emails, so this was an easy one to track out. Although the center of the low, as I keep talking about, hitting a little farther south, which is why we don't have the widespread winds, which is a good thing. But I want to take you to a live look of Whistler. This is the other side of the story, the rain, the winds, and the snow. Thanks, Control Room, for finding a great snowy shot for us. This is where the snow is piling up tonight. Drive BC recommending people taking extra caution on both the Sea to Sky and the Coquihalla. That is also where snow is beginning to fall tonight. Oh, winter wonderland scene, though, there. 20 plus centimeters expected for Whistler and our local mountains. Let me show you the current temperatures across the country. We've sort of got a tale of two sides of the weather coin continuing. Cold across most of Western Canada, still seasonal to above seasonal. We've lost that 20-degree heat in through Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal, but definitely milder in through the Great Lakes. Let's take a look at the rainfall we're expected to get over the next 24 hours. Really easing tomorrow afternoon. So the story is some heavier rain in through the Sunshine Coast and then getting that pocket to the north and east of us. Most of that, though, coming down as snow. Metro Vancouver, I'm thinking it's a 10 to 20 millimeter story through the overnight into tomorrow morning. And there's all of the snowfall totals really adding to the North Shore snow we've seen earlier this week. The snow rain line in pink there, sticking around that 800-meter mark, as I mentioned earlier. Some lifting tomorrow afternoon. Look, here's Saturday early morning. I think we'll actually get some sunshine in the forecast. Same story across most of the province. Just a little taste of sun in that between the systems forecast for Saturday afternoon. So I've just got the hint of it there in Saturday. On Saturday's afternoon forecast. I think we'll see some sun tomorrow afternoon as well after we get through a gusty start to the day. So I found the sun. It was hard work. And as we head into Sunday and Monday, the showers return, but we'll get some breaks in there.
That's good. Thank you for finding it. We appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And I know you're staying with us after the commercial break because the show is going to the dogs and nobody's exactly sure where Dozer came from, but they sure like having him around. Meet the dog that's been adopted by an entire New Brunswick community next.
Over there is my mom's sister. We can't go visit her because of the border, because of COVID. But look, we're here. We can't touch each other, but we're here. Go ahead, Ma.
These are some dark days at the J.A. McCurdy Douglas Airport. The lights are turned off in the main terminal during the day to save power and money. The CEO doesn't know what the future might hold for smaller airports in the region.
We're hanging on by a thread, some in worse shape than others. And basically, we're all seeing the same thing, services being cut by both of the major legacy carriers.
The airport is still hosting daily flights to Toronto, but McKinnon was particularly disappointed to see the Sydney to Halifax route scrapped. The line has been connecting the province since the 1940s. It was previously announced the popular flights would be suspended until the end of November. The flight has now been cut until January 10th. McKinnon is hopeful for federal aid or changes to screening regulations. McKinnon says provincial isolation rules should also be looked at. Heading into Christmas, McKinnon says the lack of flights could drastically impact travel within the Atlantic bubble.
It's a service that's really important, and certainly during the Christmas season coming, there'll be a lot of people who are within the bubble and would like to use that service, I would think, and they won't be able to.
Business Minister Jeff McClellan's riding is just a few kilometers away from the airport. He expects more requests will be coming in from the industry to adapt public health regulations on planes and in airports.
I would assume as we get to a point where we can really see the trajectory of flights into the new year, there may be some requests on provincial governments to clarify what the testing, tracing, et cetera, pieces would be in terms of what's acceptable, and then we'll go from there.
In the meantime, the lights will remain off for much of the day here at the airport. Matthew Moore, CBC News, Sydney.
CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day is going to look a bit different this year, but it's still in support of an important cause, local food banks across BC. Join us online and on Radio 1, December 4th.
Well, they say that dogs are a man's best friend.
Or a woman's, but one big pooch has become a devoted companion to an entire community in New Brunswick. He's a German Shepherd Lab mix, and he seems to be making up for lost time when he didn't have a home.
Video producer Michael Heenan put together this look at Dozer, the darling of Darling's Island.
Dozer is a rescue from the SPCA in St. John. He was there for almost a year and nobody took him.
We presume he's around 14 years old. We got him, they said he might be 8 or 9 years old. Well, we have some great neighbor around, and like they say, they love to give treat, not only Halloween, but almost every night, every morning. So they've been going to all our neighbor down the street, so he got accustomed to that, so he just love it. They just treat him like a kid, and he's going again.
We thought he was only going for the treats, but then we found out through our Darling's Island group page that he's not only getting treats everywhere he goes, he's getting love and combed and just spoiled, lots of attention. So he just, I do, and I worry that he's bothering the neighbors, especially because he'll scratch your door to get in or get a treat. So I don't know how many door repairs we're going to have to do in a little while, but he's just a gentle giant.
We were intimidated at first because we're like, who's this? We thought a bear. He's just so big. But then we realized that was what was bringing him down was probably our barbecue. Then we started giving him some treats, and then we noticed that the visits were more often, sometimes twice a day. So, he's been visiting for quite a while now. It's the love that he brings us. Like, here I am being emotional, but we just lost our dog over the summer, and it's become more therapeutic that he visits us because we're able to get that big hug and our dog fix, because we're huge animal lovers.
Does he go in your house? Well, I must admit that he does. I mean, he walks through and he gets a few pets. You know, he doesn't linger long.
Mary, when did Dozer start accompanying you on your walks?
probably about 3 years ago. You know, first of all, we just sort of see him laying in the grass beside the road, and then eventually he'd come out and greet us, and then eventually he was walking with us. So it's a great dog.
He's at least 110 pounds or more. We were feeding him full meals, and then he'd go on his tour, and then we could just see him expanding. So now what we do is we feed him less, which I think may be creating more of a tour. It might have broadened his tour. Anyway, so his treat tour. And yeah, so there's just no slimming him down. But you know what? He's happy. He's 14, something close to 14. And
he's got a great life.
He's a great dog with a great life.
Yeah.
Great dog for sure. And I've never been to Darling's Island, so I guess I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. Does your dog beg like that? I mean, would your dog go on a tour if you let him?
Oh, if treats are involved, Joe? Yeah, absolutely.
Mine too. There's a kindred spirit there, yes.
There you go. Thanks for being with us tonight. We're going to leave you right now. Take a look at these shots from Snowy Whistler. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Thanks for watching.
Gorgeous.